Welcome back to my channel. I'm Brian Kafferkey, and reach out to me on LinkedIn, Brian Kafferkey, or Twitter, @Brian Kafferkey. I spell it with a Y, B-R-Y-A-N, and the last name with a K instead of a T-Y, which is more common. So you won't find many of me. We're pretty rare. Also, I have a meetup group, which is meetup.com. Just go there, and you can search for this, or this is the link, the-ri-microsoft-brug. Do monthly presentations on a variety of subjects, and it's all virtual now. I'm excited about this presentation because it's kind of a lesser known feature that I discovered kind of writing my book, to be honest, as embarrassing in some ways that is, because it seems like such an obvious thing. And that's the ability to do code-free visualizations in a Databricks notebook with Python, R, and Scala data frames, as well as SQL, which we'll see. So I am branded with R today. I always brand myself with some sort of a thing, and I haven't done R in a while, so here I am. R is an awesome language. I love it. And we're going to show you both with SparkR and SparkR how to do this amazing technique. Before I jump in, if you haven't heard, be surprised because the word's out. I wrote a book. It's a riveting book. You're going to be just glued to it throughout. But it's a book called Master Azure Databricks Step by Step. I decided to leave Microsoft specifically to write this book because I saw a dire need in the community for people to be able to ramp up on Databricks. Now, if you're not familiar with Databricks, it's a user-friendly front end and wrapper with a lot of goodies and speed up services, etc. around Apache Spark, which is in fact the largest open source big data platform in the world. It not only supports big data, which is massive data of any kind, it also supports machine learning model tracking with something called MLflow, and all kinds of amazing stuff. It's a very hot, very popular platform, and if you're not looking at it and you want to ramp up your skills to be ready for the current age, the digital age, I highly recommend you take a look at both Apache Spark and Databricks. But again, because they are really the same, you can learn Databricks and you'll already know Apache Spark. It's just a lot easier to get started with Databricks. This is a comprehensive resource that can be used by experts as well as people starting out. But my target was people who are beginning. I get a lot of people saying, Brian, how do I learn about Databricks? How do I get up to speed? And in my own learning, I found it really difficult to kind of find a path to learn the basics to the more complex. And the things I saw online, including extra training, no fault of Microsoft or Databricks, but they tend to jump into streaming and IoT and advanced subjects before you've really walked. You need to know first, what's a notebook? How do I use PySpark? How do you use SparkR? Learn the basics, and then you're ready to kind of get into the more advanced. So that's the approach I take. And it is, as I mentioned, an expert resource, but it also takes you step by step. So everything is, look at the screen, click here, do this. And it uses a use case, which is a sort of project that a company gives you and says, this is what you need to do. We need this. And I walk you through how to solve that problem. The nice thing is these are typical things. The company says we need to, predict sales. We need to find out when we're getting fraudulent transactions or predict things. And so there's a sort of structure and a pattern which is repetitive. The basic layout doesn't change. So that's why I want to walk you through this step by step in my book. And all the code are in notebooks and data files I give you so that you can set it up and see it. You don't have to write all the code yourself. You can see it, and then you can use that in your own work. It's available on Amazon, so check it out and let me know what you think of it. Please do a review of the book also if you do buy it, because it's great to have people give reviews and say they're great. And I put my email in there. You can reach me and let me know how it's going. I've had some people reach out already. So as I said, reach out to me, connect, and please also subscribe to the channel. Click on the notifications bell so you'll get notified of new videos that come out, and share it with other people. I like to get the word out there. I'm getting great feedback, and it feels awesome, to be honest, that I'm helping people. Now for demo time. This is unusual. I'm going to go right into a demo. You might be surprised by that. So hold on. Here we are. Wrong place. Here we are. So here we are in a notebook, and I've already taken the liberty of starting my cluster, so I'm not going to worry about that. And let's start. First thing I want to do is demonstrate to you how to do this type of visualization, which is probably what you've already seen, but I'll walk through it anyway, which is using the standard SQL interface, Spark SQL in Databricks notebooks. What I'm going to do to quickly create a Spark SQL stable is use a built-in data set that Databricks provides already. That way, I don't have to hand you files. You don't have to upload things. You can just upload this one notebook and it should run where you are. Hopefully this works for you as well. So I'm going to be creating I have a Python cell. You have to designate a cell because this is a SQL notebook, you can see at the top. So I'm telling it that I'm going to do some Python code. And I'll also let you know, I like to prefix my data frames with something that tells me, is it a Spark or is it a local data frame? Because I can have data frames which are only on the head node or driver node, and they're local and they have to be small. And that would be, in Python's case, a pandas data frame, or I can have a Spark data frame which is distributed over the cluster. So the S tells me it's Spark, the P tells me it's Python, because as I am in other code cells, I may not remember what this was, and the DF obviously says it's a data frame. Then I do an underscore, and then I say, what type of data frame. So this is diamonds, because I'm getting it from the diamonds data set over here. Diamonds is just, it's about 50,000 rows of diamonds with different qualities and metrics, and we'll take a look at it. And this is telling me to use column names, so it's going to use the column names as from the headers of the file, it's CSV file, and then the schema. In first schema, true just says when you see the data types, if you see quotes and things around it, then make it a string column, a character-based column. If you see integers, it's an integer. So it's going to actually derive data types, which saves me time. So I'm going to use the keyboard just to say Control-Enter, which will run it in place without advancing. And all I'm really doing here is just creating the data frame. And you can see I did create the data frame. We can see the columns here, cut, color, clarity, all those good things. I am not a diamond expert, but I'll take their word for it. Now I want to show you, to confirm this is in fact a Spark data frame, I can use the type command, type function, and there we have it. It is in fact a PySpark SQL data frame. There we go. So what I want to do now is I'm going to make this a SQL table, and I can do that. This may itself be a good lesson if you haven't done this before. I'm going to use the PySpark method of the data frame, which is, from my data frame, I'm going to be calling the write mode overwrite. But the real thing I'm calling is save as table. Nice thing about Python is you can just kind of chain things together, different functions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say take that data frame and persist it as a table in Spark, a Hive table basically, as diamonds. And I'm saying overwrite it so that if it's already there, because I practiced this, I know you're surprised, and no, it'll just work, it'll overwrite it. So let me run that. And so this will create a SQL table. Now, because this is a SQL notebook, I don't need to use the SQL magic command, and I just want to demonstrate rivetingly that I can now query that table. It's really there. And you can do this too. Now actually, I was playing around in here, but what it should do is default to a data grid. So you've probably seen this kind of thing before. I can sort and all this great stuff. And best of all, I can convert it into a chart. I can go in here. I could even say, by default, which is kind of probably not something I want to do, but it's going to use default settings. If I go into plot options, I can control that. So maybe I want to do like series groupings. And suddenly it creates a separate line for the different values of clarity. And actually the color gets a different line, it looks like. No, clarity gets a different line. Confusing because the color is changing. Let me change that. I'm going to reverse this. So now the colors get a different color. That's easy to remember. But what I'm trying to show you here is what's going on in this plotting. I haven't written any visualization code. So that's pretty cool. And I can go here and say, I really want to make this. I don't know what it will look like, but let's say it's a bar chart. And now I get a bar chart. And you can see there's a lot of options here. I can do stacked charts. I can do histograms, all kinds of cool stuff. There's a thing called global scale. It'll actually try to apply a consistent type of scale on here. And I'm trying to get around my own microphone here. So you can also see that I have different aggregations I can do. Now the values, it says here is Z, which is kind of a weird thing. So let's change that with price. The one thing about the visualizations is it tries to take a default, but it's not very smart about that. So just change these to what you want. So now I'm looking at a plotting that's showing me by clarity. So it's measuring price by clarity, and then it's doing separate bars by color. So that's pretty cool. And I can play around with the visualizations. And again, no code involved. And I can go over to this part here, and I can change that to say a count instead of the price itself or an average, etc. So that's pretty powerful, and you probably have already used that within Databricks. So I'm not going to go beat this to death as it is, but I wanted to show you have that ability. The other thing I should point out though is by default, when you use visualizations, the Databricks Notebook is defaulting to say, I'm only going to do this for the first 1,000 rows. Now, if you're dealing with a PySpark data frame, you may have a problem if you've got a lot of rows. Be careful in one sense, because you can't return too much data. This actually is coming back to the head node, hence the limitations on how much it's bringing back. But I'm aggregating, right? Let's go back into plot options. I'm actually aggregating, and in this case, I'm saying sum, okay? So I'm saying sum. So if I'm summing, and again, it changed it, I didn't save that. Summing like this, I'll kind of go back to something similar. What I need to do is say apply, confirm it, and you'll see it's rerunning the query. Now this is very powerful, because what I just did is, it's not running the query I originally entered, which is a little confusing. It says select asterisk, which means everything. But I told it to aggregate. So this visualization is actually now gone back and aggregated. So this no longer is, you know, a billion rows or 50,000 rows. It's summarized much smaller, which is great, because now that data, that aggregated data, can come back to the head node where it can be plotted. And that's kind of a theme within your visualizing in Databricks notebooks. In order to do that visualization, it's going to have to bring the data back to the head node and do the plot for you, bring it all together, right? But when you aggregate like this, I can do that, and I can aggregate different ways right within the notebook. Or it's not a bad idea, if you know what you want to do, you can use a SQL statement or data frame control to already aggregate and then plot it how you want. You've got flexibility, but this is great, especially if your data set's pretty small. You can play around with the visuals and do what you want. And you know, if you're lazy like me, and I tell you, always be lazy if you're a programmer, do as little as possible and get results, then you can do it all visually. You're like, that's great, Brian, but what about Python? R. So let me take a look at this. So you may have used Python before, and I've got my PySpark data frame, and you can use the show method, right? And I'll see 3 rows like that. But let's face it, it's kind of ugly, not very useful. It's just dumping it. I mean, I can do that in Jupyter, and it actually looks better. Why don't we do this? And this is where it gets cool. I can say display around the data frame. So if I do that, all I have to do is take my data frame, and by the way, I don't have to create it as a separate data frame object. I could just put any kind of line or command that generates a data frame, and it will do the same. So here I got data frames, and now I'm getting this cool ability to use a real data grid that sorts. It slices, it dices it, even julienne just salad, so you're good to go. So let's take a look now. What if I click here? Oh wow, it's got really cool options, right? All these options to zoom in, play around. It's very powerful. It's giving me pop-up numbers. But what if I go into plot options? And in this case now, same kind of thing. I want to go series groupings by color, and maybe I want to do something that's more of a line chart. That looks great. And finally, I have the aggregation. I can say sum command. I can change this, right? Say apply, and it's asking me confirm. Didn't do it that time. I don't know why it didn't actually do it, but I can just click here and say aggregate overall results. So it did not aggregate, so be careful that it does. Otherwise, you might be getting incorrect information. So this is actually using the full data set and aggregating over it. Again, it's not really doing it. You're rerunning a command and sending it to the cluster to execute that aggregation statement for you. And here it tells you right here, it's aggregated by the sum in the back end. I love that because I'm interacting. Be cautious, obviously. If you've got a trillion rows back there, it could take a while, but it's really nice because I can play with this, and this is Python. So I can play with this, and I don't have to use matplotlib. I don't have to do anything, because if you have used this, then you know that to use matplotlib within Databricks, you're going to have to bring the data back to the head node anyway. You still are doing that, but you're pushing the aggregation back to the Spark cluster and saying, do all this aggregation for me, give me the results back, and then plot it, which is how you want to be doing your work anyway. And if you haven't seen this, by the way, you can drag this little grabber here and resize visualizations. And I might show us another one, but I can also take this and add it to a dashboard, which then I can show. And I've got a whole video on dashboards I'll put at the end, so you can go to that riveting video. But you can do dashboards with widgets that allow you to set different filters and things for your dashboard. So with this, it's very powerful because now I can pin these things to my dashboard, and I'm not writing visualizations in Seaborn or Matplotlib. You can do that, and that's great. But if you just want to be able to play around and do things without having to write code, you can do that. And I did want to show you that, as I mentioned, I have a data frame here, but I can do other things with it, and I'm wrapping all of this into a display statement. So I'm only selecting, for instance, certain columns. Now this can help reduce overhead, right? Because I don't have to take all of the columns back. I'm also applying a filter, only where the price is greater than 300. If I run this, I get my results, which is a subset of the overall data. Again, notice it's saying only the first 1,000 rows. Be very careful in Databricks notebooks. It is telling you this, but if you're not watching it, you may be unaware a little bit of that. Again, I can go here, and if I want, I can then say plot options, and I can change, can't see around this, I can change this to say like a count, and now I have that. I can change this again to color, and again I can say apply, confirm, and watch when it comes back. There we go. Okay, now this time it's telling you, always look for that aggregated by count in the back end. So it did resubmit my query other than what I originally had. Big takeaway is when I save my notebook, the visualizations are saved with it. I can share it, trade it, trade it with my friends, put it into a dashboard, share it with management. I could run this notebook, every day, every few hours, and you've got a nice little dashboard. Kind of like Power BI. Look at all this cool stuff you can get. Riveting. What about R? Well, I'm going to start using SparkR. And what I'm going to do here is, because I've created this now in SQL, SQL, by the way, is the one common denominator across the languages. It's available in R, Scala, Python, etc., which is great, because that means that I can use that, persist tables, and as you see, I started out with Python, but now I can use that table in R, which I'm going to do, and it's called SRDF, SparkR data frame, and I put SparkR on it so we know which library I used. Okay, so I've got that there, and let me. I'm going to put it real up here because I kind of messed up my notebook a little, but I'm just going to type in display and see if I can just cut and paste this. Let's run that. Why did it do that? Because I forgot my magic. Okay, so now I've got this. Always remember your magic when you're doing multiple languages in a notebook. And you can see all the libraries. And of course here are the columns. I can go in here, and now again I have all those visualization capabilities. I'm not going to keep going back and doing this, but all the stuff that you just saw me do with Python, with SQL, you can do now with a SparkR data frame. Okay, but you're saying, but Brian, wait, what about SparkR? Can we do it there too? Yes, yes you can. And I'll show you that as well. Now when you do this, you're going to be bringing in the library SparkR, and you can just do the same thing. I'm going to take a query like this and return it to my data frame. And there you go. And then I can take a look and just kind of show that if I do this, it just tells me that it is in fact a Spark data frame. And now I can say, let's show me that as a display. And again, I can do this, plot options, and do whatever I want. So we've seen that now we can do SQL, and that's normal. That's typically what you think of, at least I do when I think of playing with the visualizations. You can do this with Python, and you can do it with R. The last one we haven't looked at is Scala. So let me go here, and what I'm going to do here is when you do it in Scala, you have to declare the value in this case, which is an immutable type, and I'm going at SS Spark Scala data frame diamonds, and I'm going to do the same thing, use SQL to get a data frame out of that, and you can see that you have the data frame right here, right? Spark SQL data frame or Spark data frame. And by the way, data frames are all based on SQL under the covers, which is the common sort of architecture that connects everything in your data engineering on Spark. So just now all I have to do here is just do a display in Scala, and lo and behold, we got the same wonderful, rich visualizations and capabilities that you saw in the other languages. So that's actually all there is to all of this stuff. It's great. I think you'll find it interesting. I actually don't have a lot to say, which is unusual. This is a very fast video for me. But I hope you got some value out of that. Please put comments in like you like this, you learned something, you already knew this. I'm kind of curious. I don't know how many people have actually looked at the display statement to realize how powerful it is, and something that is just kind of overlooked. We just kind of jump in. Let's go streaming. Let's do this. Simple, but very, very powerful. So please like, share, subscribe. As I mentioned, notifications. Let people know about this. Buy my book. Do a review on Amazon, my book. Help me sell it. I got to put my kids through college. Somebody needs to do that. And thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Take care.